Sure. Thanks. Yeah. So yes, this is as I mentioned, this was our OLC presentation, and this is kind of what it was called. It was the AI Design Challenge, Make Your Own Instructional Design Tool. And so what we're going to talk about is a lot of our framework for how we build tools. And yeah, so this will be kind of an abbreviated version of that. We'll give you a little context of what we did and what opportunities we've had, and then what we've made with that. You should have gotten before a link to a folder that has a few things in it, and we'll talk a little bit more about what's in there. But you can take a look at that folder and kind of poke around there. All that stuff is available to you. You can make copies of it and use it as you would like. Yes. So I've gotten my introduction. I'm going to let my team introduce. All of us previously worked at the Learning and Teaching Hub, which Kristen's going to talk a little bit more about what that is. Jay's kind of moved on to the Dreamscape Learn position, and I'll let her talk a little bit about that. But Sue, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll go with Kristen and how we appear on the screen here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Chris, for arranging this. My name is Sue Huffman. I'm also a learning experience designer with the Hub. My background, like I'm sure a lot of instructional designers, is in education. Like I was a science teacher and then moved into kind of informal and STEM ed. And then I found myself here continuing to work behind the scenes, mostly in biomedical engineering and now construction management, but also collaborating on all sorts of projects, especially this AI one. So that's me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Pena. I am a senior program manager for learning initiatives here at the Hub. So my education background is in psychology, and I have a doctorate of education. But I run a lot of our professional learning opportunities here at the Hub for our faculty members. And I'll turn it over to Jay.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Jay, Navajo, grew up on the Navajo Reservation, instructional designer, like Jonathan said, over at Dreamscape Learn, which is still at ASU underneath the Ed Plus school. But yes, I have a background in instructional design for the last 9 years here at ASU, but 13 years, I would say, within in educational technology. Here at Dreamscape, we emphasize in virtual reality, but I'm really interested in emerging technologies like AI and XR. So when I was over at the Learning and Teaching Hub, I worked on courses within the graphic information technology, software engineering, and then a few other ones like civil engineering, where we incorporated like the virtual reality and augmented reality. So yeah, thank you very much for having us.
Yep. And so, yeah, you've got our whole team here, which is really exciting. So first, in that folder, you're going to see one of the things you'll see is a lot of our prompts, and a lot of the tools that we've built we built a lot of these on ChatGPT, Access, but we're building on other platforms too. But we always like to say at the beginning a statement of acknowledgement that like what we're presenting and what we've been able to do is built off of the tireless efforts of research writers, creators, thinkers across various fields. We know that that stuff is in the corpus in the training. And so we just want to recognize that their words and ideas and insights have been digitally captured and integrated into the training materials, and that originates from human labor. And we know that we're hopeful that what we do honors their work, even if the companies and platforms that we have used to build them have not maybe asked for their consent or honored the work the same way that we would have preferred. So we try to put the statement of acknowledge on there that like we have built some stuff that we know leverages the work of academia and academics. You'll see that we have scholarly sources for all of our tools, why we built them the way we did, but we like to put a statement of acknowledgement out front first. So here's our goals. This was our goals from the session. We want to talk a little bit about our AI team. We're going to kind of design a tool for your use case, but we'll show you how you can design a tool for your use case in this one, and design and develop potentially an initial prompt using our prompt template. We're happy to talk about any one of these processes. I would say, please put your questions in the chat or ask your questions out. We want this to be useful and helpful for you. We'll cover each of these things. We've also kind of made a commitment on our planning side to say, if you've got questions or things that you would like us to address or answer, and maybe we do feel like we want to get through all of our development process because it makes sense when you see it all together. If we can't get to that stuff, we set up time to kind of say, we're going to go through everybody's questions and offer responses after the fact as well. So feel free to ask, and we might say there might be times in which we say, hey, we want to get to the next thing, but we will address what the questions that are here. So I just want to make sure that we want to be responsive to wherever you are, but we also know we have a lot of stuff to cover in this to do that. So what do you have access to? So that link, that folder link there, you have access to 4 documents, and I will real quick show you what that looks like. This is what we call our starter kit, which has all of our basically prompts for, I think it's like 13 tools. It's 30 pages long of prompts and citations and stuff like that. They should all work. You can copy them and use them in lots of different things. They probably are things that you could build off of and tweak for your use cases. So you'll see kind of our prompting template. You have a worksheet that's built around our design process, which will go into more depth. We also included an example of a tool that we've built, how we would use the worksheet and how we have used the worksheet to build that particular tool. It's going to be the assignment description builder that Sue is going to talk about. And then you have our slides. So all of our slides are here. You feel free to follow along with us. Again, you can make copies of any parts of this. These are yours to have. All right. So that's kind of what we built and what we're going to do. Kristen's going to tell you a little bit about the hub and the context by which we started to be able to build some of these tools within.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. So a little bit about us. So the IRA Fulton Schools of Engineering in Arizona State University is where we are housed. And the Fulton Schools is the largest and most comprehensive engineering program in the United States. So for context, we had over 32,000 engineering students across our 8 schools in the fall semester. So we are big. And for that reason, we here at the Learning and Teaching Hub are uniquely positioned just for the engineering schools. So we're not a campus-wide teaching and learning center. We partner with our engineering faculty specifically on ongoing professional development, collaborative course development, instructional coaching, multimedia, learning technology, and analytics. So we say that because we do have a robust team here that we just sort of wanted to show some of the things that they do. And we mentioned this because you can see here and perhaps maybe realize during our intros, but we do span several teams. And so most of our AI development team are learning experience designers or instructional designers, but myself and others who plug into some of the things that we do here really enable us to be cross team collaborative and creative. And then if you want to go to the next slide. Oh, Jonathan left. Sorry, there you go. Thank you. And then a little bit more about us at the hub. So this is sort of what we call our North Star, or what guides us. But really what's important here is that we collaborate with faculty and staff to improve student outcomes, retention, access, and inclusivity across all of our engineering programs, because we believe that our students thrive in an environment that fosters learning. So just a little bit of context on who we are.
And then providing some more information on like, how did we get here? How were we able to get access to these ChatGPT and have the time and energy to like explore these things? And so just about a year now, actually, ASU partnered with OpenAI and they launched their innovation challenge. And so basically access to GPTs and training was open based off of a proposal basis. And so anyone across the university could submit proposals and be accepted that way. And, you know, AI is promising a lot of things and emerging. And at the hub, Kristen and Jonathan took the lead and submitted some proposals specifically focused on course design. So, you know, what instructional designers do, and then also like student focus groups and really trying to explore, can AI provide a perspective that sometimes we just lack, right? That we could definitely use as we're developing. And so we started this in much more of an exploratory attitude, like, can it do what it claims to do? And I joined as a skeptic saying, I'm not sure. If it doesn't do what I want it to do, I want to, you know, put a stop to this. But obviously I'm still around because it turned out to be pretty impressive. But that's how we got access in the first place and how we were able to dedicate time to research these things. And that's also how we continue to have access is submitting these proposals and joining other initiatives at ASU that allow us just continued ability to work with ChatGPT and then some other AI models.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I mean, I think the big thing from us is like we know that we were very privileged to have this access, and that what came out in OLC was there are lots of people who are at different places with this. It is affecting all of our classrooms, and it is definitely something people are interested in. We felt an obligation, like we're sharing all of our stuff out and what we've got, because we were able to get so much early access to build. Like the ChatGPT EDU product that they offered was basically built off of what ASU's experience was. And so these companies are working with us to do this kind of stuff. And we were really lucky that we were able to get continued access for a lot of people to do lots of different things. And the way we've kind of built these things together, kind of an idea of our challenge team is what it comes up with, that we knew that these accounts were valuable. We were very lucky to have them. So we came up with a process for developing our tools. So you're talking to the development team now, and we just work on like, can the tool do the thing that we want it to do? Can we imagine how it might work? And we work on figuring out strategies, understanding the ways in which we can work with the tools around those things. And so that's what our development team does. We also have a testing team, which is the other group of our colleagues who they're not a part of the development side, but they are doing the same kind of work that we're doing. And so we say, once we build something, we send it over to the testing team and says, hey, is this useful? Would you use this? Is it frustrating to use? Does it make your job harder or easier? And then we pay attention to their process, and we have a way in which we collect their insights as we're building more tools. So development team's kind of scouting what it can do. Testing team's telling us whether what it can do is really useful for them. And then our advisory board helps us make sure that we're aligned, that we're not just chasing things just because the technology can do that, but does that actually result in the kind of impact we'd like to have for our students? Does it actually mean that the classes are better, or is this just a neat thing that we can do with AI, but it offers us a governing? And so all these teams kind of work together to build something that works. And so the way we think about something that works is we talk a lot about the different levels. So impact's eventually what we're going for. Does it make learning better? But we have to start with, is it capable of doing the thing? So we know if you guys have read Ethan Mollick, he talks about the jagged frontier. The capabilities of AI are all over the place. Some things you would assume that it can do, it can't do. Some things that you didn't know that it could do, it gets a lot better at. And so we're always kind of testing what is that frontier of like what it's capable of doing. We are also developing strategies. You'll notice that our prompting has a structure to it. Sometimes we use different prompting structures, but we come up with strategies to get AI to do different things. And so that's kind of what the development team's focused most on, the research and then kind of figuring out strategies. Then we get into utility and user experience. Does it offer something of value to an instructional designer? We want to know that. If we can get it to do something, but it's useless, that's not really that helpful. So we want to make sure we have that. In the user experience department, is it useful? What can we do to make it integrated into workflows that somebody would actually want to use this, or they would think to use this at the moment that they're using that? Lastly, if it actually gets a lot of use and people are using it, is it making our courses better? How can we understand that? And that's where we go to our advisory board to figure that part out. So the insight I would have from this is like, I don't think you need to set up these formalized teams to do this kind of stuff. I think, though, imagine yourself taking on these different roles. I'm now developing, now I'm testing, now I'm doing like, is this the kind of impact? And as you switch your frame of reference, you'll notice that like I'm answering different questions at different times during the development process. And Jay's going to tell us a little bit about what we've built so far.
Thanks, Jonathan. So in terms of what we built, we aim to enhance how we design and develop courses, because as instructional designers, we work with the faculty, and being able to tailor these GPTs to help with those course developments was pretty much our main goal. And the GPTs that we crafted pretty much encompass what the key elements that you guys see here on this slide. Whether that was creating learning objectives for the course or for each module, but then also allowing or aligning those learning objectives to the content and assessments. We have a GPT tailored to creating descriptive assessments, which we could help develop essay or discussion prompts, but we'll cover that a little bit more here in this presentation. What I also wanted to highlight here is how we tested the GPTs with specific course developments and adapted the GPT to our process for course design. and at least trying to lead to impact within the course in terms of like, let's say course evaluations where the students are given the opportunity to share their voice. But we did that by working with our faculty. We got their feedback on the response of what the GPT was. And in that sense, let's say if I felt comfortable with the faculty member, I'll pull up my chat GPT account, type in a prompt and say like, hey, this is what I'm aiming for within our course development process and our course mapping guidelines and documents. And then I let them know that, hey, I have no idea what it's going to spit out, but just bear with me. And usually like they get to see what the response is because usually they're like on the skeptic side too, or don't want anything to do with AI. But yeah, so just trying to share the impact and then the lessons learned within this. We design our tools to be used openly, enabling us to build upon the results together and integrate the GPTs as a thought partner in our course design workflows. However, implementing the GPTs required a flexible approach where we were ready to adapt to unexpected events and outcomes. For example, if we might be expecting a paragraph or an output from the GPT, instead it created a matrix for us, which was like pretty awesome in most times, but sometimes it may come up as invalid. So it was sometimes back to the drawing board, but then also sharing that feedback with the development team and letting them know like, hey, let's alter it to this, and then we tested it again. But yeah, our tailored implementation strategy was crafted not only to meet specific instructional goals, but also to accommodate unforeseen challenges and opportunities as well, ensuring that resilience in our course development process and workflows. As we've woven the GPTs into our existing workflows, they've helped shape the way we think about and develop courses.
Yeah. Thanks, Jay. Like, I think that is a really good point that Jay makes, is that a lot of it's unexpected. A lot of it is open and collaborative. And the idea that you're doing for is not really something that we had a lot of success building GPTs. So AI as thought partners. This comes out of an article that I read that talks a little bit about how K through 12 teachers are using GPTs and the ones that are having success and those that are not having success. And we felt like this echoed exactly what we felt like when we were building our GPTs. And so this is kind of a complex kind of slide, but the idea is you integrate them not just to accomplish a specific task, but you allow it to change the workflow around the set of tasks that you are working on. So you're going to see the assignment description builder coming up. What Sue will describe is in a completely different way in which we would kind of craft an assignment with an instructor. It involves AI at different levels of the process, and it involves expertise coming in at different levels of the process as well. So you would allow those who saw gains. So ideally, there's this like thing in mind that you would say, well, we would see better productivity and higher quality tasks if we just let it do everything for us as a collaborator. But what we found is you need to bring it into you need to seek input from it. You need to sort of say, what is a strategy? We describe the circumstance and the context by which we're using, and we use it as a thought partner to help us think more clearly. One of the analogies that I've kind of used is that it doesn't help us always walk through the right door, but it opens up more doors for us to walk through, and it gives us choices about where we could go, and it opens up chances for us to make course design better because we notice an unforeseen possibility. One of the neat things that has happened is that new tasks kind of become available. So we can, for example, working with a faculty member, say, well, what if we just made a prompt? We designed an assignment that adapted to student preferences based off of what you've learned about the students during the semester, instead of just giving them one essay question that they all have to answer. AI makes that conceivably possible, but wouldn't be something that we would just replace with AI. You'd have to bring that into the process of how you design an assignment. And so that's what we have found, is that those that brought it in, and our tools are thought partners, those that think about AI and humans collaborating together to create something, those are the ones that we've had the most success building. We tried to build a bunch of stuff that just made outputs, and we found that they weren't that useful, and you'd spend more time just updating your prompts than you would actually engaging and having something useful at the end of it. Yeah. So how do we actually build stuff like this, which is what we want to kind of talk about now. And then Sue's going to give us an example of how we're going to do that. Basically, we have a 4-step process, and you'll notice these things align with the worksheet that you guys have access to. We define our use case and target output. We say, okay, what do we want it to do? Who is doing that particular action currently? How do they work? And what is their goal? And then we say, what thing could AI produce that would help them along the way and make them better, give better quality results or improve their efficiency or allow them to do this in a more effective way. We then, those two things, once we define those become constraints that we kind of look for. And sometimes we revisit those as we're building a tool. We then move on and we storyboard the interaction. We think, okay, what is the sequence of events that we would imagine happening that where a person thinks to use an AI and then uses the AI and then gets an output and then integrates it back into how they work. So we think not just what can the tool do, but what is the story of the user using the tool that allows it to be effective? What value is it offering in the process? So once we have that kind of mapped out, the prompt, drafting our initial prompt is just making that interaction more likely to happen. It's not describing what we want the target output to be necessarily. It's sort of saying, what is the interaction that we would like to occur? And then we start testing initially. Does that actually happen in a reliable way? We do like our own little internal capability or strategy testing. Once we get to a place where it's like, it's pretty consistent, it's kind of mapping to what our storyboard says that we want to happen. We then move to say, let's send it to the testing team. Let's see if they can break it. Let's see if they can come up with all kinds of ways to use it that we didn't think of. And then it sends us back to the drawing board to say, oh, the use case needs to be a little bit different, or our storyboard that we anticipated is different than our colleague's storyboard. And so we go back and then we can refine the prompt that way. Prompting, actually not that hard once you get into that. We don't spend a lot of time actually talking a lot about prompting. It's just putting random sets of words together that make it likely that the storyboard kind of happens. That's our kind of development process. So Sue's going to tell us a little bit about how we built a tool on the assignment description builder.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. And I know we've talked a lot about like our context and how we got here, but what have we made and how does it work? And so we picked this one. To be honest, it was almost like the origin story. It was building this one was when we kind of realized like, hey, we have a framework, we have a way of thinking through this and talking to each other through this that we can apply moving forward. And then also writing assignment descriptions, I think, is something that is very common amongst instructional designers, whether like how involved you are or how close you work with faculty. This is something that we all kind of do and we all think could be improved. So just a little bit about assignment descriptions. We try to use a very transparent framework. So it's called the Transparency in Learning and Teaching framework they have a great website, a great knowledge base full of examples and guidance. And so we use that to inform our process. And really what it comes down to is you have an assignment, maybe it's problems, maybe it's writing, maybe it's a lab, but just an assignment built, it's aligned with the objectives, it's great. Now you got to guide students into it, right? You got to get them there. And some of the best practices for that is to identify what's the purpose, how does this align with their learning objectives, telling them step by step, not the content part of what to do, but more of the logistics part of what to do, right? How do you get started? How do you submit? What files, what formatting, that kind of thing, what amount of collaboration is allowed, and then criteria, how am I going to be graded? We want students to care about the learning, but those grades, they're still mindful of them. How are they going to be assessed? What is the faculty member looking for? And then ultimately wrapping all of that up in a very nice way of phrasing it, right? Not a punitive, include this, don't include this, but kind of just a supportive, friendly, student-focused tone. And when we do that, it matters for everyone, right? For instructional designers, having a GPT that helps us with this just makes the process smoother, and it gives us a framework with which to talk to faculty about it. It helps faculty in the course development side of things because they're editing a draft, right? They're not having to start from scratch to think, well, what do they need to do? Where do they start? Do they start by logging into Canvas? We can help them get started. And then they're also answering a lot less questions, right? They're not getting emails that are just like, can I put it in Word? Is this font size okay? Can I email it to you, right? They're focused on the learning. And then also students can focus on the task. They're not focused on When is it due? How do I submit it? Do I have to reply in this discussion? Those questions are answered, and then instead they can really focus on the content and whether or not they're getting that. And so that's ultimately the goal of doing something like this. And to give a specific example, I'm working with a biomechanics course, and this is for an online program. The instructor does a lot of great things in person, and we would like to keep that in the online version, right? Lots of things can translate, but the way that students interact with them and the way they're presented to students might change. And so looking at the slide in person, they share the PowerPoint and it's not a lecture, it's like a drag and drop activity. You'll see a preview of it momentarily. And, you know, in person, they can share it, they can model it, walk around, answer questions, have their TAs walk around, you know, take over students' computers to show them what to do. Online, you got to be proactive, right? Students might be doing these things at odd hours to you at just any times of the day. So you want to be jumping ahead and answering all those questions by telling them the purpose very clearly. Why are we doing this? How does it connect to the rest of the course? The tasks, so step by step, like what do I got to do to download? What do I have to upload? How much do I have to interact with my colleagues? Those things are explained for them right at the top before they even start. And then also resources and even sometimes a modeling video if the faculty member decides to do that, but support. So that's not the assignment, right? None of this is literally about the students doing something with levers and identifying forces and torque. It's all that other stuff that can be answered for them. They can just breeze through it, process it, and then they can really focus on the assignment itself. So we'd like to show you what it looks like. Let's demo a GPT. So first, I think, what is this assignment? Kristen, can you give them a little preview of the slides just to see?
Yeah, here it is.
Perfect. And so this is a very early module in a biomechanics course, and it's really just having students review kind of like lever systems and identifying torque. And they do it by drag and dropping arrows. We're actually hoping to change this into an interactive with Articulate later on, but you know, it's an iterative process. So what do we have right now? We have PowerPoint images that they drag and respond to prompts in the notes. It tells them make a first class lever system, this torque and that torque. I'm not an expert on the content, but the students will know what to do, and the faculty member provides the background in the lecture. And so to do that, all the faculty had was that slide. She says, this is what the students do, they drag and drop. And so that's where I started with the GPT. I was like, I need to give students more info, and I need it to be quick. I don't want to sit and think about this. So then we turn to our GPT. And so this is what it looks like. We have a couple conversation starters. We're going to start with, can you help design instructions? I need help. My thought partner needs to step in for me. And so my friendly GPT is going to ask for some information. I told it to do this, but most of our GPTs actually start with context. It'll give us whatever it thinks we want, but providing context will guide it to a much more useful. So we tell it, hey, this is a biomechanics course. I provide a short description and let it know, hey, this is an online course. So that way it directs towards that. So then we'll give the GPT that information. It's processed it. We're doing this in chunks, right? It's not asking me a million questions at once. Then I have to track everything, and it's a lot. So knowing that the TILT framework, this is built with it, you can kind of see the commonalities between the questions it's asking me and the output that I'm desiring. So it's going to ask for learning objectives, assignment details, submission format, and evaluation criteria. And Kristen dropped in. I just described what students do. Those are the actual module learning objectives. And then the evaluation, this is a low stakes, a very much more like a practice, formative feedback type of thing. They're not getting graded, but they're comparing their work with each other, you know, kind of building that community of learning. And then we plug in the PowerPoint slides. Go ahead. And then it's going to generate something. I never like to watch it load, so I usually go to another tab and work on something else. I say, you do your work, I'm gonna go work on something else, and we'll come back and reconnect when you've finished. And so looking at this is not the output that I showed on the slide. This is not something that I would put in the course, and it's not even ready for me to show faculty, but it's a start. It has a structure that I can look at and say, you know what, this is pretty good. I want to keep this. I want to get rid of that. So if we go to the top of its output, we have the purpose. You know, it's rephrasing the learning objectives. I'll just put the learning objectives themselves, right? We don't need to rephrase it. We can tell the students, hey, this is exactly what we're doing. The task is actually pretty good, telling them, hey, download this, you know, do this, upload screenshots, don't upload the PowerPoint file, that kind of thing. The guidelines for success, this is a short activity. I don't think we need to have that much info. I probably wouldn't include it. How to submit, we could have some more information about how discussion boards work, and then the criteria. Again, they're getting graded off participation, so I would tweak that as well. And then also, if you notice, it's missing that kind of technology or the technology support side of things that I decided to include, but it gave me a start, and I could actually reply to this and say, hey, you know what, that's too much information. Can we cut it down? Keep this and that and rephrase this. And actually, this course has several of these. So as I was going through them, I would keep the same chat, and it was learning how I liked it to phrase for this course, and it wouldn't give me all this information. It was starting to kind of condense and decide, okay, I see what you're picking up because I kept telling it, this is too much. Only give me this. And that's the start. So then I would take that, I would review it myself and revise a few things very quickly. And then I would take it back to my faculty. Like Jay said, being very transparent about the fact that I used a GPT to help me, and that we can critique the GPT together for effectiveness, and then have their feedback on it before we decide to put it in the course.
Yeah, so that should give you an idea of like an example how we use this. The next thing we want to talk about, and hopefully you've been looking at this, and is how we use our development process to get there. But ideally, we'd love to talk about things that might be really relevant to you. We'd be happy to go more into detail about how we use this process to build what Sue just showed you. But we think this is like, that's as much context as probably we need to sort of then talk about that. But when we wanted to answer your kind of questions that you had, we just covered a lot of ground really quick, but interested in what your thoughts, reactions, where you are with this process, how much you've kind of been experienced with this, if this is, you know, similar, different, helpful, adds a new different context. We'd love to hear your questions right now. And then eventually we'd like to jump through and make sure that we talk about how we use the use case, target output, and the storyboarding to build our prompts, the prompt that we kind of build for tools like this. So questions, comments?
As you guys are thinking of your questions and comments, just wanting to like put into context, at least from the faculty side of it too, that building out these instructions and the descriptions for each one of these assignments helps the faculty in the long run, because most likely we get these faculties that are teaching so many courses that it's hard for them to remember to go back and make some of these changes. They're like, oh, next semester I don't want these 10, 20 questions because I thought I was clear, but literally this makes it way more clear for students, especially if we're teaching online courses. And we see the impact at the end of the semester when the students make those comments in the course evaluations, and that goes to their leaders, their program chairs, and seeing like, hey, we've seen some shifts, we've seen some changes in your courses. What did you do differently? And it's usually just working with an instructional designer and also having the AI tool in our back pocket.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would kind of say with building up Jay, it makes iterations a lot easier. We can just turn things over really quick, and that makes for rapid prototyping and stuff like that. It enables new things that we can do with it. So for GPTs that help on the faculty side of teaching and learning, we will show these. The way we can share GPTs is a little bit weird. You have to have access to an account internally, especially because what they've done is they've allowed, they've protected student information and ASU's data for being trained on in this. So it's actually FERPA enabled. We could put student data in here and have it process stuff, and we know that it's going to be secure. So we can't always share GPTs unless a faculty member has an account, but we have different platforms that we can do. So we have come up with ways. We have we've not done specifically gamified ways, but our grasp tool, our performance task, gets into ways in which you might conceptually design an assignment. It basically takes learning objectives and maybe a little bit of the content, and then gives you 3 different ways in which you could, using the GRASP framework, which is like goal, role, audience. I forget the rest of the parts that are the other letters, but it provides you a structured output that then you could say, I'd like to then take an output that I really liked 2 and 3 from the options it gave me. And then you could use Sue's tilt framework to actually turn them into assignments. And you could add it in and say, I'd like to turn this into an assignment, and it might be able to do something that's there. So there are different steps along the process. Adding gamified ways would be a really interesting GPT, because we would just need a model and framework for what gamified means and how we would do that. But yes, it's definitely doable and possible. Yes, we've got an active learning lesson planning as well. So we'd use this different active learning strategies, think, pair, share, stuff like that. So an instructor who's saying, how do I do active learning in my classroom? We can then say, well, here's 3 different ideas. Do any of these sound easy enough to do? And then we can help them from there. Which one? Which GPT?
Looking at what Kristen suggested in the chat.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't think I did. That was like one of the few prompts that I did not include because it's a new one.
It is new. It's very brand new. We're just learning it. But I can share what it looks like, if that's helpful. Does anyone have, yeah, I've got it. Do you have like a specific class or context in mind that I could prompt it for, or I can just sort of put something in?
I'm just curious how you structured it. So I don't know if you actually, because I have something similar that I've demoed for some of our faculty. And so I'm just kind of curious how you structured and built it in the GPT. And so I was just kind of curious, like, what your structure looks like and compared to what I've done. I've also done like other graders and things like that too. So I was just kind of curious, like, how you built your GPT.
Sure. I can show the back end here. So this is the active learning. This is the prompt. So you're trained on the cognitive benefits of student-centered pedagogy and learning theory. So we just kind of reactivate some stuff. Here, you're going to create 3 sample lesson plans, and then you let the user choose to create a full lesson plan using the template provided. So our instructional coaches have a template and strategy. So they've created documentation that we used to use this. So step by step, gather information. What are your primary learning objectives, and what do you want students to be able to know or understand and do by the end of this particular activity or by the end of the class? Where does this fit within the broader course sequence? Will students have done, what will they have done previously that connects to this lesson? What will the next assignment kind of do after this? Like, what will they do next? So kind of getting a sense of like, where does this fit into the chain of the learning sequence for the student? We then get some contextual details about the class environment. How many students are in your class? Is this a class hybrid? That kind of stuff. So it takes all of this information in. And we then get instructor preferences. What would they like to do? Then it goes in and confirms, using closed loop communication, confirms this is what I understand that you were asking me for, which gives it a little bit of time to think. An example of a confirmation looks like this. So we give it kind of a template. And then you rapid prototype based on best practices. So we give it a structure of what we want that output to look like, overview of the lesson, materials needed, explanation as to why we think it might work, variables and extension, and the time it anticipates. It's not great at time, but it's enough to help people think through that. And then they can modify this. The full lesson plan uses a template that looks like this that we just copied in. And so it will produce a full lesson plan once it's asked for the steps. So the steps are 3 options. They can choose 1, 2, or 3, or a combination of all, or they can choose to modify those options to say, this is kind of what I'm thinking. Could you make me a lesson plan for that? And then when you say, I like this, it'll create a full version of that lesson plan instead of just a prototype. It is also trained on our core, which this is their strategies that they are specifically most commonly used strategies that they're working within our faculty. So that's its knowledge base that it kind of pulls from for examples or thoughts or ideas.
This is great. Yeah, it does. I guess I have one more question. So your, like, all the information you were putting in for the instructions, did you have, because I think it's like an 8,000 token limit I think I have with my account. Do you have, since you have like an account, like a contract with OpenAI, do you have those limitations in your instructions, or do they basically kind of have different structure based off what your accounts look like?
We probably have a little bit more. I know our context window is larger, but it probably, we can probably put a little bit more, but I think our GPTs are about the same because I think I've copied a few of these over. So a lot of it's condensing. The other thing I would do if I felt like I did it, obviously more precise is better because I can ask specific questions, but I might say you have this strategy and then just give it the options and then give examples. From there, we can upload potentially more documents that it can use, but we have the same limitations as to if you do upload documents, it's not as reliable than if you put it into the prompt. And so I make use sometimes of that to put examples or templates into the prompt if I feel like it's going to follow those more effectively within our prompts.
Awesome.
But yeah, so it does help to have an enterprise account for sure, but
Mhm.
should not, eventually you should be thinking about how you could do that because I think that's coming for everybody. I think everybody will eventually have a lot larger context windows to deal with.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate
No
it.
problem.
There
Yeah.
was a question previous Jessica had put in there. Oh, well, Sue answered it for her. It's about
Yeah, FERPA data is something that they wanted to make sure that they could do. That happened on the back end. There was like a whole negotiation about how they trained, what they were allowed to do. And because we were first, I bet you we got a really, really good deal because they wanted some kind of university partner to work with. But there are people, Anthropic's doing this kind of stuff too. Like we're building our own platform that allows you to move across models that is also FERPA protected, that uses like 30 plus models. We can change between them as well. So that stuff is coming. Yeah, our OpenAI model, they're not trained on anything that we do. All right, let's start going through our use cases and how we might build this. So hopefully there'll be some questions on this because the prompting stuff is really interesting, but you'll see our prompting structure that's there. But we start from role, task, and goal. So if you're thinking about your own version, this is where I would say to start. So I'm going to ask Sue, like, what were you thinking when you were building the assignment description builder for role, task, and goal?
Yeah, so very quickly, right? This is from our perspective, this was made for instructional designers who would use their expertise to help translate, the output from the GPT with the faculty, because the GPT can do a lot. It has a great knowledge base, but I not only have my own expertise, but also a lot of context from the faculty member, the class as a whole, like holistically, I have a viewpoint. So the GPT would be made for me. Our main thing is online courses, but we utilize Canvas. So basically, we could use it for anything in there. The task for me specifically, the assignment existed, but I needed descriptions. And my main thing was I'm trying to help students out, get them focused and help them succeed, or at least try with the content as opposed to try with the logistics of submitting it. And my goal was ultimately, if it does it correctly, there will be enough information that students can focus on the learning objectives and the assignment instead of any of the logistics. And that way they can dive in. And then, with that, their questions to faculty or their questions to each other is more focused on the content of the assignment as opposed to, did you save it as a Word doc or a PDF, that kind of thing. So those were mine. As an instructional designer, I want to write very clear assignment descriptions so that students can focus on learning objectives and not logistics of online submissions or online assignment completion.
Yeah. And so I think this really helps to kind of refine. It's like takes you from like vibe. I think AI might be able to help me with this, to really refining exactly like, okay, this is what we think it might do and how we would use this, in particular, our role and goal in that. To answer your question on grading, we have not found it to be reliable enough to feel like we would put a student's grade on that. We have done things that have, for example, an instructor has, and I think it's on there in the feedback generator, an instructor has taken notes on something. We don't have it give a number or a score, but it helps formulate what we think is constructive feedback for students. So, hey, I've written up my notes. Here's what the student has turned in. Here are my notes on what it's created. Here, can you help me come up with what we think are learning-centered feedback points instead of just saying good job, bad job, or whatever. It's more about pointing out areas in which they can improve, and it gives them a structured way to write those outputs so that they can be really helpful for students. So it may help turnaround on grading, but we've not felt like we could trust it to accurately assess things. We have had to create rubrics as well. And to do that, we've had to test whether we think the rubric gets applied effectively, but yeah. Yep. So kind of moving forward, after we have our use case, we then think about what our target output is. And I would say on this slide, the most important thing to really focus on is the minimally viable product, like certainly understanding why it would be valuable and what structure it should take. If you noticed, even in that prompt that we showed before, I give it very specific. It should look like this every time we do that, because that helps the person using it have a more reliable and consistent. It doesn't skip things or make things up. It is much more consistent in the outputs that it provides. So, but really it's the minimally viable product. It has to be able to do this thing and it must not do that thing. And that is our design constraint. If we can't build something that does that, we don't feel like we've built something that we would turn out for other people to test. And so that really helps us refine what our minimally viable product is for that. So, Sue, what were you thinking with the assignment description builder?
So the biggest value was just student-friendly language. And then the structure, right, that's mostly borrowed from the TILT framework. And the minimally viable product was really just, is it giving me what I need? And is it not too wordy or vague? You know, GPT has a tendency to hallucinate or over-explain. It's so helpful. It's just going to add in all this information and none of it applies, right? And my big goal was identifying kind of what my cutoff point was. Can I give it a little bit of feedback and it gets fixed? So that way we avoid that kind of circle that sometimes happens in a prompt conversation where you're like, not quite, can you do this? Not quite there. Can you try this? And you're kind of chasing a goal. My minimally viable product was, can you do this? And if not, I'm going to go back to my instructions, not try to kind of negotiate with the GPT towards something that I'm just feeling out for. I needed a strong line for myself to decide on that.
And I would say the other thing we found with minimally viable product that's really interesting is that the structure is important. It tries to do that and it helps us see the right direction, which means 100% accuracy isn't as valuable as we think it might be. Like if it's wrong in a way that feels constructive and helpful, they say, oh, it's wrong, but I know how to fix that and I know what to do next because it's wrong. That we consider that to be a successful interaction. So we're not going for 100. We don't put it in a place where it has to be exact. So that's why the grading part is harder, because it needs to be exactly right every time. And we've just never found one that does that. But if it helps write good feedback, we would imagine an instructor might say, I think 3 of the 4 of the points that you made are exactly what I would say. And that other one, I know how to give student the feedback a little bit better, because I see what you're going for. This is like a common thing. I see what you're going for and I know how to make it better. And sometimes we'll just make it better, not even talking to it. We'll just take whatever it had and then we'll adapt it from what we need from there. So the last part I will kind of talk about, and then I think it's great to just then take questions, is this seems very long. You should look at this slide. We storyboard the interaction. We go through and think, what would be the initiating event? When would somebody know to use this? Sue gave us our initiating event. I have an instructor who has this assignment and we know we need to put it online and it doesn't have enough description to do that effectively. What information do we expect them to have? That's all that context, those questions. We just assume that's what people are going to have. So when we write that into the prompt, we know to ask for that information because we assume our users would have that information available to them. What will get started? So we imagine the first interactions that happen. What does the user say to the GPT? What does the GPT say back to get the conversation going? Is it asking questions? Sometimes you'll notice it chunked information because we found that it sent 10 questions to somebody at the beginning and like, that's impossible to answer. Who wants to do that? So we would have it chunk information to get started to make the usability a lot better. And then we have what we call the collaborative sequence. What's the back and forth look like? It gives an output. Maybe we can give it feedback. For the one we showed for the active learning, it gives some prototypes and choices. The user makes a choice, and then it gives a further developed version of that. We think that's the collaborative sequence that we would see for that one. Then the last one is the final output. What does it look like at the end? So that's if you remember, our target output. How do we get it to that target output? And what is that going to look like? Because that helps the last part, which is to transfer this back into the workflow. So understanding how our fellow instructional designers work and understanding our own workflows helps us to say, well, this target output allows you to then copy this in, put it into Canvas and show the instructor to say, here's a draft version of what we think we might work for. For Sue's target output or workflow, it was, I'm going to take what you gave me and then I'm going to edit it to make it fit exactly what we're going to do. And then I'm going to send it to the instructor and they're going to give us feedback on it as well. So notice it doesn't all happen. We're not maximizing what the AI is doing. We're putting it into a place where it's likely to help the people involved be successful at what they're trying to do and make a better quality output. And so that's kind of how we think about storyboarding this interaction. So I'm going to skip over to kind of just go to the prompting part. So then this gets into our structure for prompting. So role and goal comes from that first part, the use case assessment. The step-by-step instructions is the collaborative sequence. The embedded expertise is what we think people need to know to be able to do some of that stuff. Constraint is what we are going to be the target outputs to say it needs to look like this, it needs to behave like this, do this thing in this order. The customization is it asks questions and then responds based on how the user answers. And then the anchoring text are going to be those files we upload to say, use this framework, use this thing at this point to inform your response. And so if you look at a prompt, you can see all of that stuff came from our development process. And then when we write a prompt, we make that interaction happen by using this structured framework. We say roll and goal first. That's almost everything. All of our prompts start with roll and goal. Then we put in a little bit of triggering expertise, understanding by design and backwards design. We give a set of step-by-step instructions. We offer ways to personalize the GPT to your use case. We give it some constraint, and then we put in some anchoring text. So the grasp method here, this is what the output should look like. And also, if you want to know what grasp is, this is what you should produce every time you put an output. That is basically a prompt, but it's only possible, and this goes through lots of iterations to get to this place, when we're paying attention to, does that storyboard end up happening on a pretty regular occurrence when we put this prompt in? That's kind of how we test our kind of process. Okay, that was a lot, but you have all of our prompts. And one of the things that I'd like to kind of think about, you can think about is like, you can go look at our prompts now that you've seen our process. You could probably reverse engineer how we got to where we are based off of what the prompt looks like and knowing how our process and journey is to get there. And hopefully that informs how you could start creating things on your own. I know we don't have a ton of time, but happy to answer more questions about what we're doing, whether this, how you might apply this, or even specific use cases that you're thinking about.
As you're all thinking, I'll share. This probably sounded very polished and like very, step by step sequential. And we did this whole thing, but it was really messy. Like as Jonathan mentioned at the beginning, not only was our development team and process messy, putting all of this together was messy, but it's helpful in talking through things because we were collaborating on a lot of things. So I just wanted to mention that also. It took a lot of, going through the mess to get to this point.
Yeah.
This is as good as we could do to make it fit into like 30 minutes of explaining how we do our thing.
To kind of piggyback off, Kristen was kind of like getting to know our faculty in a sense that they don't know instructional design like we do. So once knowing that piece, and then also being able to articulate, or at least honestly being willing to explore with AI and knowing that, hey, how can we best support our faculty members? And we always try to frame it that way, that like, hey, anytime you get, discrepancies from your students, know that we're on your side. We're going to help you through those kinds of challenges. And so once they kind of get that, I guess, support system and feel like they're supported, they're more willing to be honest with their feedback, especially with the AI stuff, and say like, hey, I don't want anything AI in my class. But then once we share with them like, hey, this is what we built, what do you think? And they'll take like maybe one sentence or two sentences from it. But overall, it was knowing that we don't know the content as well as you guys do, and you guys don't know the instructional design. Let's use this tool to kind of bridge that.
Yep.
That was kind of my question, is just like, instructor responses to it. And do you find that they are wanting to grab these tools and use it on their own, or would they rather just come to the instructional designers? I was you kind of answered my question about, what their response to it was.
Yeah. I mean, I think others, we've had different responses on them. I think most people have been, if it helps, it helps, and they're excited about that. I will say all of our tools are designed for instructional designers. You'll notice that there's competencies for instructional designers kind of embedded into that. Making a tool for faculty is a little harder because we don't know what they know and don't know about instructional design. And so we kind of think about ourselves as working together on this stuff. If we were to design, the feedback one might work because it just uses an instructional design framework that you can help with feedback. So that might be an example of one that we could give to an instructor and they may be able to use it. But part of it is we want to enhance the expertise of the people of instructional designers. We actually think that these things can make instructional designers even more valuable and more impactful. And that's where we started off. And that was our goal from the challenge. There has been a lot of talk about how can we build things for instructors. I think you do need to have embedded expertise in instructional design and education theory and some other things to really fully grasp this, because if you don't have that stuff, it's actually hard to use it for that like input and expertise part. You end up really going to just, I want the output. Just give me the thing, give me 5 learning objectives. If they sound good, I'll just put them in. That would not be a good enough process for an instructional designer on our team.
So there was one quick question. Oh, I think
Yeah.
you got it. Okay.
Ethan Mollick that was our structuring prompter technique, is through Ethan Mollick. His method, we adapted it a little bit for our use cases. We've used some of his prompts. So More Useful Things is a website that has a bunch of other prompts. I'll put that in here, that are there. The article there was really helpful for thinking about the ways which we frame that stuff. And then a lot of this is like UX stuff, like that's use case is from kind of UX world. Target output, minimally viable product is a kind of software kind of term for that. And so we just adapted a few of those things. Some of that stuff comes in the courses that we actually work on. So like that's interesting too, to see their content kind of influencing how we do that. So it's from all over. The storyboarding is a thing that I've used for a long time in like assignment design. Like you storyboard the user experience or the student experience. What's the ideal student experience compared against what they're actually experiencing? And that can help you notice where the gaps would be. And we just adapted it for this.
I know we're at time. There was also a question about course workload estimation. I'm not sure if you want to share more about that, Federico.
Yeah, what are you thinking with that?
So like once you have like a breakdown of all the activities that you have for a course, the way to actually look into, is there a balance on course workload versus, like, is there this week that it's like, 150% of the amount of work? So I know that the Rice University put out like one open source, like course workload estimation, but it's very focused on discussion prompts, reading times, etc. Many of our faculty, the kind of activities they do are related to labs and some of the things. So actually trying to put all that together with the tools that are out there is not that clean cut. So there's no one tool that I can point them out to use. I can point them to 5 tools that they can use. But is there something that you've explored to actually look at that balance throughout a course?
So we have the module learning sequencer, which kind of sequences content across a thing. We've not had one that's tried to estimate workload on that. What I would say is anytime you're having AI right now do calculations, it's not very good and it will make up numbers. What you can do probably is to say a discussion prompt, a quiz, and an exam has a typical number associated with how much time we would think that would take. So if you put in, here's my course plan, I would like you to associate numbers with those things and just give me the number at the end. And then I will take those numbers, put it in a spreadsheet. I will take that, put it in Excel, and then sum that total across the weeks. That might work because you're going to have something that is reliable on doing mathematical calculations. And so our workflow would be, I can take a general kind of text-based plan, have it convert to numbers through how we have the GPT associate that type of activity to a certain number of time that we typically think that takes. And then I would like to look at total weeks by exporting that out to Excel and having it do those calculations for me. That's kind of the way I would think about doing that. I'd have to work on like the fine tuning, but that would be my basic strategy. We've not done that though.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I know we've gone past time a little bit, and Jonathan and your team, thank you so much. This was wonderful information. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to send out a follow-up email with a link to the recording. And your team at ASU, you're more than welcome to attend any of our collaboration hub meetings in the future. I've put a list of our upcoming. We've got Mark Grieg, who is going to go over UTverse, which is our personal University of Tennessee AI assistant. So that's going to be next time. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'll let you go, and Jonathan, I'll be in touch. I really appreciate it.
Thank you,
And if
Chris.
anybody, yes, if anybody needs links or any problems with getting to the resources, just shoot me an email and I'll get it to you. Thank
For
you.
sure. And questions, if you got more questions following up, we're happy to answer them.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.